하다모 로종가 도마라 Tenga Lama Namjuji Gongwa Tadela Yamakashi Sabalana Maranga Jola Bemadon David Dingy Ronga Lama Teni Sharon Zombo Koseki told me by my way Inji Dodon Sengina Gomni Tateta Lama Saji Lama Kingi just of the song.
When starting out with the training of mind training, we have heard from among the instructions of the preliminary practices for such mind training that there is the special preliminary of practicing the so-called Guruyoga meditation. We're also being told that this Guruyoga is to be practiced before whatever session of Dharma or whatever session of meditation practice we perform. And for those of you who have just arrived, who have not heard this instruction in the previous days, from which you would like to repeat it. We imagine, as we sit in the meditation posture, we imagine how our own root teacher is truly present above our own heads. We imagine 1,000-petaled open lotus flower, inside of which there is a moon disk, and on top of this sits our root guru or root lama. He smiles radiantly and he regards all sentient beings with limitless compassion. So in this way, let us now, for a few moments, imagine how our own good teacher is present above ourselves.
Lama so an dabei.
Kannst die Bitte an ihn? That we pray to the Lama. Lama sola do tape. Lama de ronga jo song ma pet. Rong song de kado wezer na dong dan ba yun na gong na ge sa ga ta lo yo. Ta de no do xiap zhe zhong ge zo de yo song. Having prayed to the Lama in this way with one point of devotion, we then imagine how the Lama dissolves into ourselves from the seat above our heads through the crown of our heads, and how he slowly descends downwards to come to rest at the level of our hearts. There we imagine him to sit in a cross-legged position inside a sphere of 5-colored light that is shaped like half an egg, roughly open towards the top. And this way he comes to rest in our heart center.
로종가 생 바치 정나 제 라송 로종가 간도 쳇토가 로원도 라서 로종바 치가마 다는 두바다 다 로종가 동식단바서 다지 동식단바 나는 하나랑 저거요.
From among the instructions of the 7 points of mind training, we have reached to the 6th point, which is not yet finished, to reiterate the 7 points themselves. The first one we have heard about is the actual preliminary practice, the preparation. The second point is that of actually giving rise to and nurturing bodhicitta, the 2 types of bodhicitta. Then the third point is that of how to make this practice, the practice for the duration of our lives, which is followed by the next point, which is how to work with adverse circumstances as they might appear in the course of our practice. And we have heard how to implement these, and we have then finally heard about how to go about of what kind are the various types of commitments that we take upon ourselves as practitioners of such mind training, having given rise to this enlightened attitude. So this is the point where we have reached. This is the point where Rinpoche will take it up again now.
Jinzen shukchenpo yebe damba tang, jinzen jen tangji la jinzen meba dangwa la soba tenji gen damba yorwa, senjen tangji. Ha ten ngarang zong lo zhong gang dobla tenne, jinzen jen tangji tang ngarang ni yewe ke zo, ngarang ke damba de pa yorne shukchenpo meba zi. Senjen tangji la zewa do soba shukchenpo yeba de pa yorgu go yore. Yandan Honala Giba, Arange, Gewa, Droba, Sawa, Lega, Semper Sono, Sina, Yenjetan Kona, Yabuzi Guru, Yena Pento Guru, Tenga we get any Loju, Dana Sono, Dambate, Jurgu.
Concerning these points, there is another saying by Chakavayesha Dorje, the author of the mind training of the root text itself, in which it says, having transformed the intention, rest, or let it rest in its own place. Now, what is meant by these words? Having transformed the intention. Since beginningless time, through limitless lifetimes, our intention was predominantly to bring about benefit for ourselves, if necessary, also at the cost of others. In this way, we have immersed ourselves in innumerable negative deeds which have brought about suffering and distress, etc., for both others as well as ourselves, and we have not spent any time whatsoever thinking of the welfare of others. Now, the intention of the mind training itself, of this practice, the intention in the first place of the whole practice altogether is to change, to transform that intention, to transform that exaggerated self-regard which heretofore until the present moment has been the dominant, has been the driving force behind everything that we have been doing. Since beginningless time and countless lifetimes, we have always considered ourselves to be the most important thing, and therefore we have considered others as of lesser importance, and we have allowed all sorts of deeds which were based on this erroneous idea to follow, and thereby accumulated all sorts of negativity and brought about suffering both for ourselves and others. Now, having recognized that this is not the case, and having transformed this, this is what is supposed to be left resting. So having changed the intention in such a way as to now bring about welfare for others. This is what the main thing about this entire mind training is all about in the first place.
Rawa de Rikangona, Hewa to Rimona, Jalantanki, Yamso Lingo. Yinja Matsurwas, So, Jim Mumbas, and Naruki, Lord John Gong, the song to somebody, the last of a tendy, Nyan drop Myuma, Nyan drop Muguba, Naruka Sunday, song to a Sando Giba, Netoba, Jim Mumba, and Ricky Guruyoga.
So, as we have heard so many times, the predominant intention of this mind training is to bring about a transformation of ourselves. Now, such a transformation does not necessarily have to be brought about in a very spectacular way. There's no reason, there's no point whatsoever to try to stick out from among the crowd, to be more special than others, to make a big show of how great practitioners we are, how much better, how much more intensively we practice in regard to others. There's no point in this. So why not, with our outer conduct and the way in which we behave and the way in which we show ourselves, simply go with the flow and simply let it be, simply be at that. Inwardly, however, of course we should strive for the very highest goal. We should try to have the very highest intention, and we should practice according to such instructions to the very best of our ability, and then, of course, if possible, progress as fast as possible. But it's not necessary, again, in any way whatsoever, to make any outward display of this, to make any show of this, so that people would say, like, what a wonderful Dharma practitioner, and how great a person, and how intensive and how wonderfully does this person practice. On the other hand, it is also not necessary to debase oneself with all sorts of inappropriate behavior. Simply, where the outer conduct is concerned, simply stick with what it is that everybody does, and inwardly, secretly, progress in your practice to the best of your ability. For that matter, there is no point whatsoever in letting everybody know what it is that one is practicing. One does one's practice according to the instructions as one has received them from one's teachers, and what in particular that is, and how far in particular one has progressed along these lines, is nobody else's concern. Shortcomings continues with yet another line saying, in which it says, do not speak about handicaps or shortcomings. So it goes without saying, if we find ourselves among a group of people and there's someone who is in any which way handicapped, who might lack a limb or something, a hand or an arm, then there's no point whatsoever to point this out in front of everybody by way of deriding this person in such a way as to ask, well, what happened to that other leg of yours? Where did you put it? Where is it gone? Or to point out whatever other mistakes people might have performed at a certain time. For instance, we might find ourselves in a group, and there is one among them who has, for instance, been caught out stealing and who has spent time in prison because of that. What point would there be to point this out to everybody present, saying, there you are again, how was your time in prison in which you had to go to because of having stolen and having been caught in the act, etc. What point would there be to point such things out? So therefore, such things should not be talked about. We should remain quiet about such things. Similarly, if in regard for Dharma practice, if we, for instance, know of someone who has incurred a breach of his commitments in any which way, then we should not point this out publicly so that everybody knows that such and such a person has possibly overdone it a little bit and broken or damaged their samayas in any which way. These are the things which should not be talked about.
Shadaran Zumbadan giving teaching, Hilla Babi Tejet, Shawadan, Dadantini, Shawan Jomba Gure, Hello, lots of the Nimba Gagoni, Daddy. Chin Trupaji, Trupajan, can you come back when you're not? That's all. Then he said, you know, that's Sherab. Then he take down the Dharma. Then he said, Charan Kana, Peva, Charan Devon, do it, take Dharma. Then they kept a gas, come on, Zum keep a some number of things. Then he met their catch a sugar. Down window, then get you. And it's on. Then he takes you to catch it and not there. Koronga, Yella, Papa, Yella, Tepa, then you get down here with it. When I get down, Chola Yendi, Yapondu, Charang, and Rodan Yapo, Jungandu, Charanga, Sanjila, Panto, Yapondu, $10 up with it. Take a Sam Gagri. And the Tom says, you're the Mujana, Jimmy Dow, Jibara, and Dina, and Jibanda, and Charanga, Lega Yapo, Legend, Charanga, Nama Yapo, Jam Togandu, Charampe, and Trupa, Mundu, Charampe, Yapo, $10 labor. That's at the Jimmy Dow, Yana. Charanga Lega Titani, Charanga Noma Tamji, Sama Zo, then Tamji Pe Chipozi, Pemasi Yapondo, $10.
Our outward behavior, the way how we address other people, can also be very helpful. We should not address people in an unfriendly, in a harsh way, but we should rather more show them a friendly, a quiet, a relaxed and smiling face. There is no point in shouting at people right early in the morning and kind of giving them all the kind of bad news that we possibly could think of, but rather we should address them in a friendly and a relaxed way. We should inquire about their well-being in a friendly way, so that a nice, friendly, relaxed setting is being created for a conversation with such a person. Instead of shouting at them, as Rinpoche has demonstrated, we should show them a smiling face. We should show them a friendly face, and in this way, then the living together with other people and interacting with people will be so much easier. Similarly, for instance, if we find ourselves in the presence of men, we should praise their accomplishments, saying things like, oh, I've heard your job is going well and you're providing well for your family and you're successful, I only hear the best of you. And for instance, if we meet with ladies instead, we should praise their household skills and their cooking skills, etc. So in this way, altogether, like to summarize it, to be friendly, to be relaxed about things is much more helpful than being rough and tough, as for instance the Kampa people are known to be.
Lama and Roth and sound like you can get him. Tongi line, call a yapo, Mudu, call a jan, and the Shinto, good, that is so. I call a yapo Maresa, and it's something on Maresa.
Again, Shakawai Shidoji continues to say, do not contemplate the shortcomings of others. So, he says quite clearly here, there's no point in thinking a lot about what might be wrong with others, what might be their shortcomings or their mistakes, particularly not those who have entered through the door of the Dharma, our Vajra brothers and sisters, those with whom together we have received instructions and empowerments, who practice in the same way as we do. what point would there be in spending our time trying to find out what their mistakes are and gossiping about them? None whatsoever. Particularly also in regards to our teachers, our lamas, our teachers, or those who have completed practice in retreats, 3-year retreats, for instance, who in one way or the other are helping us with instructions, with explanations, practice, or our general Dharma understanding is concerned. Do not look for mistakes in such people. There is no point whatsoever to spend one's time looking for whatever shortcomings they might have and even pointing them out. Particularly when constantly seeing shortcomings or mistakes in others, and all of the time looking for these, all of the time pointing these out, what point would be in doing so? In the end, what it all comes down to is that our own perception is mistaken. So when we see mistakes in others, when we see shortcomings in others, actually they're our own. It is just that we have conditioned ourselves to always look for the bad, to always look for the negativity in others, and this is why we see this in others. So yet again, this is something that is definitely to be avoided.
Then Koronga San Lopertawa, Lokaki, that Songi, the moon, the Songi, Rimandu, Kotara, Ngo, Kong, Zanzong, and the Song, then Koronga, and Melonia Shutanga, Che Yosi, and they tend to talk in Nema tongues, to Ronia Shutanga, nature, Ropati Chazel, Choga, and the dead Romatanga, Tungumundu. And this song should do, then Songi, song, that Charon, the Jumala, Lota Masses. Charon Shapo Dangan Sana, Charon Samaki Latineta, Chevik to say to la Lebdiores, Shapo Dangan Sana. Then Charon Samaki Latin, Charon Shadow, that and dictating Mala Lota Mazi, sung to Charon Danzo at it, and it go at it, not the Shapo Dangan Shadow Marzete or Johnson. Then it called Shapo Dangan Cella, that's some Sana could get a hako or a tigre. That Samaja Latin and Aro Sherab, Labrador, that Shapo Tenga, Sama Mazua, no. Then Aro Shermare, then imagine that some decide that you can read is my Shapo Tenga, my Shamason, that you then go corporate Labundo song. Then go Shapo Tenga, Sama Mazuni, did it. Shapo Tenga Toronga got the Koron Bami car coming, Samatan Mazu Bami coming. That choosing tongue change Maria. Could choose it, tongue of it. They chose the toll like your name, that long song tell it,
If we continuously see mistakes in others, then it is said that we would even see mistakes in the Buddha if we should meet him. And there's a story of a monk that lived in the retinue of the Buddha named Lekpa Karma, or fortitious karma, that could be translated, who attended upon the Buddha for 25 years. And within all of that time, he constantly saw some faults in the Buddha, until he eventually then, when these 25 years came to a close, he told the Buddha, he said, well, I don't see anything special in you. And he thought to himself, I've been walking all over the country, all over the place together with the Buddha, but to me, he rather seems like someone who is just leading people astray, like an imposter who has no qualities whatsoever. Now, talking about this with the Buddha said to him, do not think in such a way, because in 7 days, the time will come for you to die. Now, that monk, being not very impressed with the Buddha, constantly seeing fault of him, was of course also doubted that very much. And he thought himself very clever, thinking like, well, now here comes my chance to prove him wrong once and for all. And he said, the Buddha said to him, because of some wrong food, that you will not be able to take, within 7 days you will die. That will be the cause of your death. And that monk then thought, well, for that 7 days, I just refrain from food, and then I go and tell him, see, wrong, I was right all along. But then, at the 7th day, when the 7th day was just about done, he felt extremely thirsty, and he thought to himself, well, a sip of water will be okay. He drank that water, which instantly turned into poison, and he died.
Any day, Lama Jando, young course of our Desi, Zena Desi, Kami Kashi, Yona, Bemi, Pando, Yosade, and Aran Song. They and do any Panota and Combat Chunzi or a Tatela charges you console lazy, no charges you do, then Combat Nisha, Tamba, Nisha, Taji, Taniki, Pagundu, Lagado. Then tell her, then Aran many Pekka Yana, there's a Galicabo Yoga, Logindo, Taconsote, Shujuka console lazy, Tantika Charantona, Sadot, Chaye, to Charantona, Shaggy. Then Yana, then many Pekka Yan Matamna, then Aron Sontanala, there's a Mon Jimala, Aron Son, choose over paw, then they pick up Kuju over it, then they check out the Mugu at Zina, they pay me Paducha was at. Then he said, sort of a Desi Pekka Yadiona, then he called lazy nona, Desi Charonto.
Once again, Rinpoche would like to talk about a point, I guess predominantly for those of you who have just arrived. As is very well known, the weather here is very unstable, and even in the summertime it's sometimes not very much like summer, so therefore many of you often have great difficulties staying outside the camping ground. Particularly elderly participants or those with young children find it very difficult under such circumstances to stay here. The cold, the rain, etc., nothing more needs to be said. Therefore, Rinpoche for several years has been thinking about how beneficial it would be to have a building, to have a house that has sufficient accommodation, a number of rooms that at least such participants who experienced the greatest difficulty during such adverse weather, where they could stay for the duration of the course. Now, on top of that, we also have a resident Lama here, who occasionally gives short courses, or Nyungne practices might be offered here in the center, to which participants would have to come. And of course, again, they have to stay somewhere. Often these courses take place in the rather cold, in the colder months, so camping is out of the question. And generally speaking, to have such rooms at our disposal would make it possible to have a lot more Dharma activity going on in this center, much more than just the summer course as we're conducting now. Therefore, one of the two buildings which are over there on the other side of the road has been marked to be converted into such a place, and there are plans in which the smaller of the two could be made into a building with altogether 28 rooms. Now, the story is this, that our trust being registered in Germany, the property being in Belgium, there are great difficulties in receiving loans from banks. There are various different rules with various different banks which preclude this, which make it impossible to get bank loans at all. Therefore, what we're looking for, what Rinpoche would very much request those of you who are able to contemplate, to think about, is to give loans, private loans, interest-free private loans to the center, so that that project can be realized in the near future. There already was a presentation about this from the members of the trust. Maybe another one will happen. Nevertheless, whatever details are to be known about this, feel free please to talk to the center members, to the committee members, to find out more about this. This is a project that Rinpoche has been thinking about very much, and that Rinpoche would very much like to see completed, preferably in the near future.
then special party, then coming to Narang Kadu and Narang Tinon Dujuta, then of course last of Narang Common Duju, but then really Chai Yori. Then our care, some of Yori. Coming.
Oh, so the Rangi coming in
One possibility, for instance, which has apparently already been employed in several other centers, is that individual people sponsor or loan the money for individual rooms, which in turn then, if they would come here during courses or if they would come here for individual short retreats, of course they would have a right to use. Now that is one possible idea, that is one model that one might contemplate.